This is 5 on 20 News, where the news is sober, but the newscasters are turned. Happy Cinco de Mayo, friends, with Zaina Peterson
and Joel Foster, coming to you live from our studio in downtown Tucson.
Yes, and first up, the local headlines.
Under the proposed Arizona state budget, Maricopa Sheriff Paul Penzoni stands to lose $1.6 million for his gang task force. While Penzoni will lose out, the budget still would fund similar task forces in Pima and Pinal County. The provision to take away the funding was included in the criminal justice section of the state's budget, which was approved with an 8-5 vote. All 8 Republicans voted for the provision, while all 5 Democrats opposed it. Isn't bipartisanship a beautiful thing? Democratic Rep. Mark Cardenas pointed out that Pinal and Pima counties have new Republican sheriffs who were both supported by the provision, while the Democratic Penzoni lost out. But Governor Doug Ducey's spokesman says that the funds will still be used for public safety and partly to take action on Arizona's untested sexual assault kits. Democratic Rep. Ken Clark said that the state is going to lower public safety for people evidently just in Maricopa County, and that's, quote, not doing your job.
A recent report found that Arizona had the 9th highest number of drinking water health violations in the country. The report by National Resources Defense Council said that at least 219,000 Arizonans receive water from a system that has committed at least 1 violation. These range from the discovery of arsenic, nitrates, and coliform, which contains E. coli bacteria in the water systems. Uranium has also been found in the water of the Navajo Nation in northeastern Arizona. The report also said that 2.4 million Arizonans receive their drinking water from the system that have some type of Safety Drinking Water Act violation. This represents 36% of the state's population, which is higher than the national average. Nationwide, an NRDC spokeswoman said that nearly 77 million people were served community water that violate at least one Safe Drinking Water Act rule. Thirsty?
Nope. In a recent poll, nearly 2/3 of Arizona residents opposed the big, beautiful wall on the Mexican border. The poll was conducted by KTAR News, which found that 62% didn't want the wall, while 37% said they supported the wall. 1% refused to answer or did not know. Rep. Raul Grijalva said that the opposition comes from a variety of sectors due to economic reasons. The border wall got more support from those who were 45 or older and lived in either Maricopa County or rural Arizona. Only 28% of Pima County voters supported the wall, so we've got that going for us. Grijalva said that people who live closer to the border tend to oppose the wall because they've seen the effects of what's already going on at the border. Makes sense.
National parks in Arizona raised $995 million for local businesses, according to a recent report by National Park Service. This compromises the 12 million people who visited the state's national parks last, which was a $63 million increase from the year before. The report says that the spending supported more than 15,000 jobs and generated a total of $1.5 billion in economic activity in the state. Nationwide, there was a record 331 million visitors to national parks, who spent $18.4 billion on lodging, food, gas, admissions, local transportation, and other fees. This generated 34.9 in economic activity, but not everything is so peachy. Experts say that infrastructure in many of the state's parks are past due for improvement, and this could put the economic engine at risk. Roger Clark, program director for the Grand Canyon Trust, said that neither state nor federal agencies really invest what is needed to make sure that the Grand Canyon remains the desirable destination it is today. A Senate bill introduced in March would allocate more than $10 billion over the next 30 years to park maintenance, but has yet to get a hearing. Keep in mind that repealing Obamacare took less than a week for Republicans. Clark said that the aging water system in the Grand Canyon is in need of redesign and replacement. He called it one of the most pressing issues among all parks in the nation. Kevin Dow of the National Park Conservation Association agreed with Clark. He said that the canyon's pipeline is over 50 years old and it's long past the time when it should have been replaced. The Trump administration has heard the calls and plans to establish a program to replace the pipes. The plan involves digging the deep mines of the canyon and replacing the state park employees with coal miners.
Solid plan. Right. Former U.S. Rep. Gabby Giffords joined congressional Democrats on Wednesday to accuse Republicans of pandering to the NRA by pushing for laws that aim to scrap gun-free school zones and deregulate silencers, among a host of other bills. Giffords was shot in Tucson in 2011 and was critically wounded. She called on Americans to fight against the recent gun legislation. Giffords said that, quote, stopping gun violence takes courage and that now is the time to come together. Her appearance comes a week after Donald Trump made a speech to the NRA where he said that you came through for me and I'm going to come through for you, in reference to support by the gun lobby. But not everyone was on Giffords' side. Arizona Rep. Paul Gosar denied that his party is snuggling up to the gun lobby and said that the accusers are either, quote, lying or ignorant. He said Republicans are beholden to their constituents who demand that we protect the Second Amendment and the right to defend themselves and their families. Gosar is a co-sponsor of the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act, along with Arizona Reps Martha McSally, Andy Biggs, and Trent Franks. The law would allow people from gun-friendly states like Arizona to carry their concealed firearm to states with stricter gun control without legal recourse. Critics say that the law is basically a federally mandated concealed carry permit, but supporters say that it's a federally mandated concealed carry permit.
And I want to take a moment to talk about the program you're watching right now. Here at 5 on 20, we are undertaking a new kind of citizen journalism. We're going to give you the news as we see it, and we want more people to speak up with us. We need writers, hosts, anchors, camera people, sound people, the whole gamut. The times require a new way of informing ourselves, so join us, do it and do it now. Email us at info@creativetucson.org to get involved. And if you think there's a story we're missing, a person we should interview, an upcoming event we should cover, or have any news tips for us, shoot us an email at info@creativetucson.org. We are here for you, and we want to cover all stories from all points of views, so don't be strangers. And now in national and international news.
Georgia Governor Nathan Deal signed a bill allowing concealed carry weapons on college campuses in the state, reversing his earlier position on the issue. Deal vetoed a similar bill last year, saying it was, quote, highly questionable that allowing weapons on campus would make students safer. He said that colleges should be sanctuaries of learning where firearms aren't allowed. So it was confusing for Deal to flip-flop so quickly after such a strong statement. Deal said that his earlier opposition had to do with the way the previous bill was written. The bill didn't include exemptions for so-called sensitive places such as preschools, disciplinary hearings, and some offices and dorms. For this bill, the Georgia legislature was sure to include these exemptions to get their laws passed. Georgia is the second state this year to allow concealed weapons on college campuses. Arkansas passed a similar law earlier this year. But Utah was the trendsetter, as they were the first state to pass such a law in 2007. That was the same year that a Virginia Tech student killed more than 30 people on campus, making it the most deadly mass shooting at the time. At least 10 states now allow concealed weapons on campuses nationwide. After signing the bill, Deal said that, unfortunately, in parts of the state, the path to higher education travels through dangerous territory. He must have been talking about Rush Week. Atlanta's chief of police opposes the law and asks that schools wait on policy guidance to be worked out before the law goes into effect on July 1st. Students and professors have also staged protests to oppose the law, which they claim will put them in more danger. Maybe they would have gotten a better response if they waved guns around while protesting.
And it looks like Donald Trump's homecoming wasn't so cozy. Over 1,000 New Yorkers gathered to protest in Manhattan as Trump returned home from the first time he became president. The protesters met 2 blocks from where Trump was scheduled to make a speech on the USS Intrepid aircraft carrier. Protesters banged pots and pans as they marched toward the Intrepid, a homage to the style of protest in many Spanish-speaking countries. They chanted slogans such as "Say it loud, say it clear, immigrants are welcome here," as cars honked in support. Eventually, the protesters were stopped 1 block from the Intrepid, at which point they detoured to Dewitt Park in Midtown, where they continued their protest. At around 3 p.m., the protesters were paid a visit by financier George Soros, who handed out giant checks to the crowd and thanked them for a job well done.
Knew it. That was good. Knew he was behind it. A Somali politician was mistakenly killed by government forces this week, according to government officials. Abbas Abdullah Sheikh, 31-year-old government minister, was killed in his vehicle after soldiers mistook him for a militant Islamist. After the killing, Somalia's president cut short a visit to Ethiopia. Sheikh grew up in a refugee camp in Kenya and became Somalia's youngest MP in November and a minister in February. According to the military, soldiers came across a vehicle that was blocking the road and suspected it of being driven by militants. President Farmajo has ordered security chiefs to find out exactly what happened and promised that the killers would be brought to justice. Somalia is fighting a long-lasting battle with Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked militia group who's been terrorizing the capital of Mogadishu. Since 1991, Somalia has lacked a functioning government, and much of the country is still under the control of Al-Shabaab and regional warlords. So in other words, the hipster vacation spot for 2017.
The Justice Department has opened up an investigation against ride-hailing giant Uber over software that allows its drivers to avoid law enforcement, according to Reuters. The Uber used software called Grayball, which shielded drivers from police in areas where the service wasn't supposed to operate, such as in Portland, Oregon. In court documents, Uber's lawyers said that the company used the software, quote, exceedingly sparingly. The investigation comes at a time when Uber has been caught in a number of scandals. It started when a group of former female employees alleged that the company engaged in a culture of sexual intimidation and harassment, which Uber acknowledged and said they would fix. Weeks later, Uber CEO Travis Kalanick was videotaped yelling at the Uber driver after the driver questioned him about recent pay decreases. Kalanick solved this problem by deciding to travel in a private car from then on. He's also developing a line of robotic women to replace his female force to avoid future sexual harassment charges. Oh, that's interesting.
Technology. It's crazy, right? A Western agency says that the Syrian government has continued to produce chemical weapons, according to the BBC. A document shown to the news agency says that Syria is producing the chemical and biological munitions at 3 main sites near Damascus and Hama. All 3 sites belong to the Scientific Studies and Research Center, a government agency. If the claims are true, then the Assad regime would be violating a 2013 agreement where Syria agreed to destroy their military weapons stockpiles. The document also alleges that both Russia and Iran are aware of the chemical weapons operation. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or the OPCW, has been monitoring Syrian sites for any evidence of chemical weapons, but the document states that production has continued regardless. The OPCW last visited Syria between February 26th and March 5th and is waiting for lab results from samples taken from the various facilities. The report also alleges that Syria is falsely claiming that the 3 facilities are used for defensive purposes, despite using them to produce weapons with offensive capabilities. It names senior official Bassam Hassan as a key figure in allowing the use of chemical weapons. Hassan was previously on the U.S. sanction list in 2014 when he was Brigadier General of the military. Syria was forced to give up its chemical weapons in 2013 as part of an agreement with Russia after an attack by government forces. A month ago, Assad struck again, with the U.S. claiming that he ordered a chemical weapons strike that killed nearly 100 people in the country. Assad denies the allegations, claiming that it is part of a U.S.-led plot to overthrow him. Regardless of who's right, everyone can agree that picking winners in Syria is like picking the best rotting pumpkin from a dumpster fire.
And a recent study by the Roosevelt Institute shows how much influence money has in politics. The study goes beyond most other efforts in that what it looks like as a specific legislation occurring at different points in history. One point touched upon is the influence of Wall Street on our politicians. While Democrats pushed legislation establishing the Dodd-Frank Act, which sought to rein in Wall Street, the study shows that many of these same Democrats later supported the finance industry to weaken Dodd-Frank. Why? Because they were given money by Wall Street. The report found for every 100,000 given by Democrats by Wall Street, politicians were almost 14% more likely to break with the party's support. Democrats who voted in favor of finance were often given $200,000 to $300,000 from the finance industry, raising the odds to 25 to 40%. The report also mentions that campaign financing is so widespread and opaque that only 50% is tracked by academics each year. Another situation that the study is the impact of the telecom industry in connection with the vote over net neutrality in 2006. They found that for every $1,000 that representatives received from corporations supporting net neutrality, they were 24% more likely to vote in favor of the legislation. And finally, the report found that to sway most lawmakers to support going to war somewhere in the Middle East, all it took was a grilled cheese sandwich.
That's it. It's easy.
This was 5 on 20 News with Zaina Peterson.
And Joel Foster.
Next up, Joel gives us a peek into his week's media vortex.
Welcome to This Week in Mediocrity, where we present you with all the best in the worst of the media. I'm your host, Joel Foster, and it's Cinco de Mayo, which means there will be a lot of white people driving drunk tonight, so please be careful. I wanted to start today's edition by talking about a recent favorite of mine. It's someone scrawny who likes to fight, scoff, wear bow ties, and always seems to look like he's watching a baby being born for the first time. That's right, I'm talking about Tucker Carlson, Fox News' new it guy. Tucker stepped in after Bill O'Reilly got fired for being too presidential and sexually harassing enough women to make up a football team, if Bill O'Reilly ever thought that women could play football. If Fox News were Van Halen, Tucker Carlson is kind of like the Sammy Hagar. And of course, that would make O'Reilly the David Lee Roth, if only due to his self-absorption and his love for high-stepping. He's never going to sell as many tickets as David Lee Roth, but he'll endorse anything. So maybe that's why Tucker Carlson was offered an 8-figure book deal by the publisher Threshold Editions, which makes sense because Tucker's show challenges our pain thresholds each night. And if you're someone that's not into math, an 8-figure deal means that he would make tens of millions of dollars for writing 2 books. But it's a good deal for Threshold because who wouldn't want to be lining up to buy a book by a guy who says things like this?
Prayer breakfast, things exploded. And of course, Deputy Press Secretary Eric Schultz was asked to defend that on a press briefing on Air Force One. Take a listen to Eric Schultz trying to defend the president's comments. He says the president believes that when we fall short of that, we need to be honest with ourselves and look inward and hold ourselves accountable. That's what gives us the moral standing around the world, not just because we assert it, but because we hold ourselves accountable.
So we're responsible for the Crusades 1,000 years ago? Who is us anyway? And by the way, who ended slavery in Jim Crow?
It was
Christians.
completely inappropriate.
The Reverend Martin Luther King. Christianity is the reason we don't have slavery in the world today. I mean,
but
talk
do you
about
know, and think about who's at the National Prayer Breakfast. The most even
News Sunday.
Yes, thank you, Christians, for both starting and stopping the practice of slavery in America. To extend that logic, you could also make the case that Hitler actually ended World War II by killing himself. He mentions Martin Luther King Jr. but fails to provide any context. That's right, MLK was Christian and also were the people who imprisoned him. Ironically, if Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, Tucker would be calling for his arrest, but that's a whole other issue. Because we need to get to Tucker's insightful interview skills. Like this clip with Chris Wallace where Tucker really stays focused. The only problem is that he's focused on something that Wallace clearly doesn't want to talk about. Let's take a look.
News Sunday. Chris, the president, as you know, spoke last night to the Congressional Black Caucus about Obamacare, and here's part of what he said.
Let me say, as clearly as I can, it is not going to happen. We have come too far. We've overcome far darker threats than those. We will not negotiate.
We've overcome far darker threats than those, he tells the Congressional Black Caucus. That is a dog whistle. That is the race card being played. Can you see any other explanation for it?
Oh, I don't know. I think to get to the real point, though, they are not going to compromise on
what
this.
Do you mean? Isn't it news if the president says at Congressional Black Caucus, we have overcome far bigger threats? I mean, isn't that, it's taking the rhetoric to a new place, is it not?
I don't know, Tucker. Do you want me to talk about the health care?
Yeah, if you would. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Can we talk about healthcare or baseball or Game of Thrones or anything other than what you're saying? Okay. Last week, we played a clip where Tucker harangued Teen Vogue reporter Lauren Duca for covering celebrity culture along with politics. Let's take a quick look to review.
I don't know. I just take your words at face value.
So did you read the entire article?
I did. I also read Liam Payne is 100% certain One Direction will continue. Adriana Grande rocked the most epic thigh-high boots at Jingle Bell, and Black China and Rob Kardashian went through the messiest breakup of 2016. Those are your other pieces. But I'm trying to get to what you're writing about Trump taking a break from the thigh-high boots and ask what you mean about him committing psychological abuse on you.
A woman can love Ariana Grande and her thigh-high boots and still
just letting you know that I read you in Teen Vogue as of today. Fame, California is the promise.
So does Tucker have a problem with covering celebrities? Or is it just female celebrities? Maybe it was because Tucker just gets better celebrity guests, as we can see here where Tucker tapped into his A-list Rolodex.
Fame, California is the promised land, or was. Fabio is an Italian-born model and actor. He just became a U.S. citizen last year. He's been in this country for a long time, in this state, particularly California, but he says it's becoming unlivable thanks to liberal policies, in particular the failure to support the police. Fabio joins us tonight. Fabio, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Hey, Tucker, thank you for having me. Yes, California, is a mess. It's like coming from Europe. I already saw this movie before. So, instead to take the sides of the law enforcement, Governor Jerry Brown took the sides of the criminal. And, he's the champion of Proposition 57. He went on TV and talked about then he's going to release some, non-violent criminals because California has no money.
you see how hard he was concentrating? Tucker, you're listening to Fabio, not Steven Pinker. And I wonder if Tucker insisted on choosing the Fabio romance covers in that opening montage. I would love to see that scene. And this interview sent me down a Fabio internet wormhole, which is usually reserved for bored middle-aged women and fans of the movie Dumbbells. Fabio has been making the rounds on conservative media lately, for some reason, speaking out against Prop 57. So why is Fabio so against Prop 57? Does it require everyone to cover up their chests? No, but Prop 57 was passed by California voters in November and allows the parole for thousands of nonviolent offenders in the state. The measure is being used to ease California's prison overcrowding problem that's made prisons in the state look kind of like the Fire Festival, but with better food. But why does the law bother Fabio so much? Well, it turns out that Fabio's house got robbed last year, and he's worried that violent criminals will be released on the streets and, I guess, rob his house again. Because there's nothing more than a parolee wants to do than rob the house of a D-list celebrity. So Fabio hates the bill because he's scared. You might remember that Fabio was attacked by a bird back in 1999 when he was riding on a roller coaster in California. Since then, Fabio has been a firm supporter for gun rights and even worked on the campaign for Elmer Fudd's Senate run. So there you go. But I'm going to switch it up a little bit because I'm always told that what I do is liberal propaganda and that I'm trying to destroy America. And to that I say, relax, Mom, okay? So I'm going to criticize the Democrats for a change. In particular, Hillary Clinton, who was back in the media this week when she was interviewed for the Woman for Woman conference, an event that wasn't as sensual as Bill Clinton thought it would be. Hillary had this to say.
Hillary Clinton today speaking out on what she believes cost her the election.
I take absolute personal responsibility. I was the candidate. I was the person who was on the ballot.
Shouldering some of the blame, but not all of it.
I was on the way to winning until the combination of Jim Comey's letter on October 28th and Russian WikiLeaks raised doubts in the minds of people who were inclined to vote for me but got scared off.
Team Clinton believes that is the day she lost the race. Clinton was in the air when the FBI director announced he was looking into her emails yet again. The election was less than 2 weeks away.
If the election had been on October 27th, I'd be your president, and it wasn't.
The news.
Yeah, Hillary got cheers for her performance, with supporters saying that she stood up to Trump by exposing Russia's role in her election loss. But I was kind of disappointed because she could have been a little bit more graceful in her loss. Calling back to the Russian interference isn't going to convince Trump supporters of anything, but only give a pat in the back to her supporters. Remember the happy-go-lucky, woods-wandering Hillary that showed up after the election? The one that didn't want to get involved with politics? I liked that Hillary. She was humble, thoughtful. I wanted Hillary to emerge from the woods with a salmon in her mouth. This Hillary comes across as bitter, and it commits the cardinal rule of how to deal with Trump. As we've learned, when it comes to insults, you cannot defeat Donald Trump. He's the Michael Jackson of insults. He's 100% opposition, and if you give him fuel, he becomes a wildfire, which is exactly what Hillary did. And the thing is, you don't have to go after Trump because he's going to fail on his own merits. Just look at the Trump administration and how they've been blocked by the courts, the Constitution, the American people. For a guy who says he supports guns so much, he happens to shoot himself in the foot an awful lot. So I hope Hillary stays out of the limelight and allows Trump to fail. Or succeed if it benefits us all, but come on. So Hillary, if you're watching, and I know you are, just sit back, relax, and watch the show. There will be plenty of time to do interviews after he's impeached. All right, that's all the time I got for today. I'll see you next week for another installment of the Department of Mediocrity. I'm Joel Foster, and you have yourself a great weekend. I'll see you later.